Yes. Yeah. No, they're on Sundays. Yeah.
Is that Jewish Sundays or here?
The ongoing trauma class is going to be here, and it's going to be on Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it finishes at 4. I don't remember things like that. The flyer is right on the table, so it should have the details there. So welcome back from break. I want to. There's the rocks on the back table. If anyone didn't get your own, and I've walked around with rocks in my pocket for years. This is the first time that I've had a rough rock. Usually I have lovely smooth rocks that are very friendly, but this one was nice because of the strong sensations that it brings. So I thought that there's a whole new potential with these rough rocks. I want to reiterate a couple of things that I said in the beginning in case those of you didn't hear when you came in a little bit later. And then go into the Tonglen and then do another meditation and then break into work and do dyads. You know, one of the fundamental principles of the Buddha's teaching is and one of the supports that can be used not just in a ritual way, but as a way of helping like re-establish a set point, is the concept of refuge. You know, refuge is to really align oneself with what is vast and timeless and pervasive. And all of the Buddha's teachings are aimed at helping us know, taste, touch, abide there. And one of the real tragedies of trauma, and I would say even probably more so with intergenerational trauma, is that we somehow feel that that's not something we can ever or could ever experience. That it's like in our genes, that we are wired, that there's something missing or wrong or damaged or broken or somehow fundamentally flawed, that we can't actually know what pervasive and the luminous mind is. And so for me, all of these years that I've been both a practitioner as well as navigating trauma, I've been working it from both sides, working it from the side of touching into what is timeless and pervasive, as well as the nitty-gritty work, the trench work of toggling back and forth between unpleasant sensations and then bringing pleasant sensations, working with the conditioning and learning how, when not to believe it very strongly, and how to bring positive thinking and positive, not just positive thinking, but the reality that I'm no longer so vulnerable now, that I actually have quite a lot of resource, and to remember those things. So when we understand refuge, not just as some kind of ritualistic thing that religious people do, but as the point or the place of what the Buddha's teaching is pointing to, and that has always existed. It existed before the Buddha, and it will exist when there are no more people living on this planet, that it is actually something that is present, it's ever present, and that it's what we are made out of, then it begins to put a question mark around the kind of like the thinking that everyone except me, you know, everyone except me, and everyone else might be able to know what refuge is except me, you know, which can be one of the tragedies of having lived with trauma for a while, is that we can think that way. That, yeah, refuge may be relevant for people, but not me, you know. Somehow I am not capable or able or, you know, I've been through too much to know what that is. So when we understand refuge and have ways that remind us of that, either with images or chanting or scripture or bowing or poems or prose that help us touch into what is radiant and luminous and ever-present, and begin to get it, that it's for me too, then we have a template that we can work from that is a template of wholeness that we come back to, rather than this subconscious need to fix the brokenness, and sometimes not so subconscious, a real hunger for wholeness that presumes there's a brokenness that we need to fix. So one of the things that has been helpful for me with the trauma work that I have done is to remember that it's conditioned, it's not innate, that it's a physiological response, it's not a psychological problem. And it responds to specific tools, it responds to certain kinds of medicine. But what's also helpful to remember is that some of the tremendous assets of the Buddhist tradition can be used in a way which actually causes more complexity and problem rather than alleviates it. And one of that can do with the idea that when we sit, we're just supposed to sit still. So we talked about that a little bit this morning. For some people, sitting still is, it's really uncomfortable. And so in a situation where sitting still is really uncomfortable, then my encouragement is to not try and make yourself sit still, but to stand up. Or like in this meditation space, there's this aisleway here, to sit next to the aisleway, and when you're feeling like that, just to get up and just slowly walk back and forth on the aisleway, even, like for example, even if I was talking or speaking, even to do it while I was speaking. So the tradition encourages us, or the teachings encourage us to sit still, to stay with what is happening, and to not necessarily do something that's radically different from the group. And what we need to learn is that those are contextual instructions that do not usually apply when we're dealing with some activation from trauma. We need to not sit still. We need to be careful to attend to what our experience is. We need to pay more attention to where our feeling of comfort and ease is, rather than to what everybody else is doing, and see if we can find the safety in a space like this to accommodate our own needs in a way where we're not being terribly disruptive to the group. So, for myself, if you needed to get up, I was saying that if you felt like you wanted to run away, then I'd encourage you to run away and to run around the whole block and come back to the front door and see if you got back to the front door, if you still have the same feeling. Because the running impulse is actually one of the ways that we transition, we release, and that's actually one of the things that's important to allow ourselves to do. In fact, sometimes we don't need to run. We can do the same thing by pedaling on a bicycle. You're activating your leg muscles in a way where your system feels like you're escaping danger. And because this comes about an inability to escape danger, being able to escape danger is a really important, helpful improvement. The nervous system can relax when we feel that we've successfully escaped danger. So, I was dealing with mold sickness and got activated with all kinds of chemical sensitivities, and going into people's houses was a little bit like going into a war zone. And somebody was really gracious and invited me to their home, and I went into their home, and they had taken everything out of the house that had chemicals in it, and they'd cleaned it 4 days before so that everything could settle down by the time I got there. And I got there, and I was so grateful, and I went to go sleep in the sheets, and the sheets had been laundered with fabric softener. And my system just went, it felt like I had walked in front of open machine gun fire. It was just like absolute red alert, So my brain, I was trying to use my brilliant brain and tell myself, this is fabric softener. It's not open machine gun fire, It's fabric softener. So I was trying to convince myself with logic that this was actually not something that I needed to be frightened of. And my reptilian brain would have nothing of it. Absolutely not the slightest bit interested in how brilliant my thinking was. So I managed to get through the night. I didn't sleep a wink. And I got up the next morning and I had to ride my bike downtown because I had an appointment. And I got on my bike and I started pedaling. And I noticed that I started to relax and calm down and feel soothed. And by the time I got downtown, I was in a totally different state. Because what had happened was I had escaped the fabric softener. I had run away successfully from the fabric softener. And so the reptilian brain had absolutely no interest to know that logically there was nothing that the fabric softener was going to do to hurt me. Because the chemical activation was telling me that I was in grave danger and that my life was in peril. And so that part of my system needed to get away from the danger. It didn't matter that it didn't make logical sense. But when I engaged my lug muscles in the same kind of thing that you do when you run, then my whole system started to calm down hugely, noticeably. And so then when I was calm, I could think through what had happened and recognized, of course, I couldn't talk myself out of it. It's not something you can talk yourself out of. So we work with things from both sides. So when it's hot, we take water and we make ourselves cool. When we're anxious, we do what we can to calm ourselves down. When we're feeling nervous, we do what we can to be around people who we have a little bit of sense of confidence, you know? Some sense of a little bit of safety, you know? And in this way, bit by bit, we begin to piece together the kind of network that is helpful for us to be able to work this through. And what I said at the beginning, and I'll say again, because the part of our brain that is first impacted by trauma is the part that makes the subtle distinctions, then one of the reasons why it's really useful to work with people who understand trauma rather than people who are talk therapists, because their job is to keep you in that magic release zone. And that's the place where the most amount of release can happen the fastest, in a way where there isn't as easy chance of reactivation or re-traumatization. So the Buddhist things that are brilliant is understanding the importance of integrity, of cultivating refuge, of cultivating the precepts so that we know that we are living with integrity ourselves, of being in environments of sanghas where they are also working towards being clean and sober and living with integrity. The understanding of making choices, of turning the mind towards things and turning it away from things, of bringing forward loving kindness, of learning how to calm, of learning how to replace anxious thinking with something that allows us to feel more confident. You know, we can think about our dog, or we can think about the plants that we've got growing in the garden, or we can think about something that your mind just opens and settles and relaxes and you just feel joy. And so one of the challenges is that the nature of negative sensations is that it grabs attention more so than positive feelings. And so that has happened evolutionary, because when we pay attention to what is dangerous, then we survive better than if we don't. And so the way it works is that our mind will grab hold of something that is negative, like it's etched in stone. But something positive, like loving kindness, or a moment of calm or relaxation, or glimpsing what refuge is like Teflon. It's like it just slips off. It doesn't stick. And so when we know that that's the way our brain functions, then we need to use our meditation to pay particular attention to what's positive and loving and calm and kind and gentle and relaxed, and notice it, accentuate it, make much of it, feel what it feels like, notice the contrast, so that we can go against some of the biological wiring of our system in order to support us as we navigate this trauma release. So one of the challenges in a meditation, traditional meditation context, when there isn't an understanding of trauma, is the culture can be not only not supportive, it can be antagonistic. So if the culture in a meditation retreat is to sit silently through each of the meditations, to not move, if the meditation's instructions are to focus on what is going on, then these three things by themselves put us in a position of conflict. Because when we're navigating trauma, we need to be able to move. We need to be able to get up and do what we need to do, even if the group is not doing that. And we need to move our attention back and forth between what is unpleasant and what is pleasant. And so depending on where you are in your process depends on the kinds of retreats that would be helpful. Doing a loving kindness retreat probably most of the time would be helpful. Doing a long, silent insight retreat would be much more potential for activation in a way that, unless the teacher understood where you were at, might not be helpful. So it's not that these things in and of themselves are not helpful. Insight meditation is hugely helpful. We just need to understand the context of when to apply it and when to be careful with applying it. Are there any questions with this? Any comments about it? Yes?
I guess the last point about insight being potentially activating, can you talk a little bit more about that? Why specifically, or what is the precise danger there?
It's not insight. It's just that in insight meditation instructions, sometimes the instructions are to stay with what is arising. And if what's happening in a person's process is they're in the middle of a trauma activation, it's not helpful to stay with what's arising. They need to move their attention away from what's arising and flood their system with things that help them relax and feel calm and feel safe and feel loving. So they need to take their attention away from direct insight practices and do loving kindness practices and focus on not the sensations that are predominant, but the sensations that are more subtle, to accentuate them, and even to not even focus so much on the body, but to open up the eyes and to look around and to get one's clues from the visual field. And so depending on what's going on for you, depends on which kind of meditation practices are going to be helpful, particularly, and depends on who's teaching and what kind of understanding they have. So teachers who understand trauma is a very different kettle of fish than somebody who doesn't. Yeah? And these are contextual, so it's not like it always says that insight meditation is not helpful or useful. But when there's a particular strong trauma activation, that's a different thing than when it isn't. It's very contextual. Yeah? But we come from a tradition, or I come from a tradition that tends to claim, it's everything. It can sort out everything. And so we tend to relate to it. I mean, it's taken me a long time to learn the discernment of when it's helpful and when I need to be careful, or when I need to be not doing so much of the meditation. Yeah.
Something I was thinking about is that with the dissociation is that in the past my meditation practice has been kind of a way of dissociation for me, I think. And so it's very helpful. And now since the trauma that I can't close my eyes and meditate. I can't do it the way I used to. So it's interesting that it was dissociative and then another trauma happened and now I can't even dissociate like that.
So blessings absolutely come in strange packages, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, please.
I just wanted to comment on the sitting practice, the sitting still. I think one of my, what I've noticed in exploring my own trauma responses is that it's like, I have a very strong freezing. So, like when something's activating for me, what happens is like my body will like lock down and like not want to, like I feel like I don't want to move, like I don't want to move. But the not moving is actually, I think not really helpful, because I'm not, like let's say I'm in a, what happens is, for me being in a very open office environment can trigger a lot of stuff. And then instead of like getting up, going for a walk, or like there's a ping pong table in the office, like I can ask somebody to go play around the ping pong. I don't do any of that. What I'll do is I'll hunker down even more and lock myself down.
So what's really helpful when that can arise is to notice what happens before the lockdown. And so there's usually a window of sensations and symptoms and thoughts and what's going on in your system before the lockdown happens. And so during that lockdown, you have choice. You can get up and you can go for a walk. After lockdown, your choice diminishes. You gotta wait until the whole cycle does itself, and there's very little choice in it. So part of our tools is to begin to open up the places where we have choice. So that narrow bandwidth before you go into lockdown, to get super curious about what happens there. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What kind of things do you notice happen there? And what kind of choices help you in that so that your choices open up rather than narrow down? Because it's absolutely correct, where we pass over thresholds, and over those thresholds, our choices diminish considerably. You know, that'll also be the case with negative thinking. Like we get into a place of paranoid thinking, and everything thinks absolutely terrifying. There's absolutely no place in the world to trust. But before it escalates, there will be some choices about where we place our attention and what we do with what we observe. And so part of what we're developing the muscles for is to open up the windows where our choice is and notice a lot. What does that look like? And what are the places where we make choices that it narrows our choices? So lockdown is a narrowing of a choice. Paranoia is a narrowing of a choice. Unmitigated rage is a narrowing of a choice. So what we can do is we can see the space right before it, get super curious about it, and then learn how to make choices in that space beforehand that opens up the window, either of time or of choice, so that we have more options for a longer period of time. But sometimes what happens is that we just get into spaces and that we don't actually have that capacity ourselves. Now, I remember this used to happen to me around food. I was a nun and I was having blood sugar issues, and I would same thing. I had a window, and in that window I could eat something. But after the window, I couldn't ask for what I needed. But if somebody put food in front of my face, I could put it in my mouth, but I couldn't say, I need to eat something now. So in the monastery, I said to my sisters, if you notice me looking glassy-eyed, if I'm not speaking coherently, if I'm starting to fumble and drop things, don't ask me what I need. Just put some food in front of my face and tell me to eat it. So I could ask the community that was close to me to be allies for me and help me in that way. So part of what we can learn to do is to identify that window, and if there's a person or two that we can share that with, you know, to say, well, when I get like this, this is what will help me. ask me to go for a walk, tell me to look outside the window, remind me to drink some water, help remind me to put my hand on my heart. That you ask for support that helps you to do the things that you know work for you, but it's not always easy to remember when you're in that space yourself. Yes, please.
So there are two thoughts that keep showing up. And one is when you talk about observing and dissociating and witnessing. Later in this one we talk about witnessing. So is the body the guidance to see when? I'm trying to see what is a useful and skillful observing or witnessing. I'm a little confused about how we can pay attention to our experience without dissociating, and then being in it in a way that is supportive and resourceful.
Very good question. Did everyone hear the question? Did everyone understand the question? No? Okay. So what's the difference between observation and disassociation? And how can we engage in our experience in a way where we can move towards what's skillful rather than move towards what's unskillful? Is that right? Did I get the question right?
Yes, and adding this word that you use also, witnessing.
Witnessing. Okay.
Is observing and witnessing the same?
Well, what I want to do to answer that question is not answer it with my words. I want to answer it with our bodies. Okay? So let's all stand up and see if we can come to an answer with this ourselves with our body experience. So notice what you notice now in terms of just how you feel. You know what your body feels like, what your breath feels like. Notice the level of anxiety that's present. Notice if you have a sense of you're witnessing things, if there's any sense of if you might be disassociating in any way. Just notice. Notice what you notice. And notice what you notice, and let's see if we can make an invitation to notice without any judgment. You don't need to be any way different than you are. That you're absolutely perfect just with what you're experiencing right now. There's no wrongness in what your experience is. Okay? So now what I'd like to do is to take us through a series of Qigong exercises, breath exercises, and see what happens when we do these movements as to what happens to our ability to know and to discern. So we'll do some just body movement. We'll start with our knees and just rotate our knees. And as we're doing these movements, what my encouragement is just to relax and to feel the pleasure of the movement. And if you can do 65%, that's perfect. So we're not trying to be superstar knee bending rotators. We're just a 65. This is a lazy day Sunday, And then the other way, lazy day Saturday. Just feel what it feels like. Just feel what it feels like. Just feel what it feels like. And now, just letting the hands come up and lifting our hands over our heads. Notice the difference in our body shape when our hands are over our heads and when our hands are down. And again, lifting our hands up. So just noticing the difference of our body shape and how that feels. Nothing too magic or mystical, just shifting the body shape, noticing the impact. Now, what I want you to do is to rub your hands and rub them harder, rub them faster. Get them nice and hot. Feeling hot? Awesome. Now pull them apart. And can you feel the tingling?
Yes.
Tingling, yeah? Okay, now pull it in a different dimension. Can you feel it still in a different dimension? And make it further apart. Can you still feel it? Yeah? Everyone can feel it still? Yeah? Okay, this is chi, it's life force. And chi, life force, is in everything. It's in our bodies, it's in our world, it's in rocks, it's in trees, it's in water, it's in animals, it's in everything. And so one of the ways that I have also worked is to bring chi into my body and to watch how that can help me regulate. So now let's do these exercises again and let's see if we can move the chi. So underneath the floor is floorboarding, and underneath the floorboarding is a planet, Earth. And we can let ourselves feel the earth underneath us. So for me, there was a big shift in my sense of safety when I could connect with the earth holding me. I got the safety of that before that was helpful in me connecting with loving kindness. So feeling the earth, receiving our weight. And now when we breathe in, just let our hands come up. And when we get to the inhalation, top of the inhalation, exhale, turn our hands down. And so we can first imagine that there's a life force coming up from the earth. And then when we release, we breathe out and the life force is going back into the earth. So the life force that is coming in is healthy and is new and is fresh and is alive. And the life force that's going out is stagnant and stale, no longer needed. And for me, I like seeing compost. So when I exhale, I like to see that what is no longer useful for me turns into compost and is life affirming for the planet. So I bring in the life force and I release. And when I release the stagnant energy, and I also make an intention to release what no longer serves me. And so now bringing the hands up and over and allowing the chi to extend through the fingers up into the sky. And from the sky down to our heads and back into our bodies and through our legs into the ground underneath us. Bringing the hands up and above our heads. And from the sky, bringing the chi down into our bodies, through our legs, back into the earth underneath us. And so now when we bring your hands up, just imagine the chi flows out just 1,000 miles through your fingertips into the sky. And when your hands come down, the chi flows into the earth 1,000 miles beneath your feet. So this chi from the earth comes in and out. The chi from the sky comes in and out. And now lifting the hands up and extending out to either side and bringing the chi from either side back into the body, down through the legs and into the earth. Bringing up and out, bringing out, in and down into the earth. So it's like we're in a chi bath. And this chi is conscious and loving, it's responsive, and it's not personal. It's not based on the personality characteristics, it's not based on what we have or have not done or achieved. We're in a chi bath. And we can allow the chi bath to also support us, to soothe us, to nourish us, and to help us know what ease and well-being feel like. And then as we know what ease and well-being feel like, we can allow it to express itself with just a little smile on our face. Just the tiniest little smile on our face. Just what it's like to be bathed in something that is conscious and alive and loving and present. We are part of, and yet it's not dependent on us. Okay, so now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to plant your feet. Just notice that your feet are planted about a shoulder's width apart, and allow your weight to be front and back centered and centered side to side. And now, without lifting your feet up, I want you just to move your hands forward and back. So there's a twist in the spine, and the feet stay planted. And we're moving the chi through the spine. On the in-breath and the out-breath, the chi is moving. So now in this image, we can see ourselves moving the chi around the sides of our body. And up through the central part of our body. So I want to take you through the Qigong exercises. So we start with our feet and shoulders width apart, and we start with our arms coming up, and we let our fingers point towards each other. And again, if there's any time in here where it doesn't feel right, or it feels too tense, or you feel stuck, move, don't stay still. But if you notice that you start shaking, don't try and stop it, let it shake, because these Qigong exercises are fabulous for letting some of the stuff that's stuck in our nervous system release. And when it releases, we can feel hugely more relaxed. So we're going to allow our fingers to point towards each other, and our elbows to be pointing down, and our thumbs to be pointing towards each other. We're relaxing our shoulders, we're relaxing our legs, we're relaxing our hips, we're relaxing our back, relaxing our jaw and our chewing muscles, and just breathing. And now when we're breathing, I want you to imagine that the life force from the earth is coming up our legs and filling up our lower abdomen, and then going down our legs back into the earth. And when it fills up our lower abdomen, it fills up with a bright light, clear energy, and when it releases into the earth, it takes everything that's icky and sticky and tar-like and mucky, what we have no more use for, and releases it into the earth, and it's a compost for the earth. It's life-affirming. So all the stuck, icky energy goes into the earth and becomes a source of compost, nourishes the life. And if you start to shake or tremble, allow yourself to shake and tremble. Don't try and keep yourself standing still. So breathing in through the legs, filling up the lower abdomen, and releasing back into the earth. And now, turning the hands, pointing outwards, just looking around, space around us. Again, continuing with the breath, and now allowing the breath not to fill up the lower abdomen, but to fill up the whole abdomen, the whole middle part of the abdomen. So it fills up the middle part of the abdomen, and when it releases everything sticky and tar-like and stagnant, and releases back through the legs into the earth. And the earth takes that and turns it into something that's life-giving. Now moving the hands and pointing them so that they're facing the ceiling. And now this time the breath is coming all the way up into the head, the cranium, the brains, the brainstem, the sinuses, filling it up with fresh, new breath, releasing everything that is stuck and stagnant, what is no longer useful, what does not serve. And now releasing the hands and coming into the hands being parallel with the earth and just feeling the earth. So the earth has held us every single step we have ever taken, has received our tears and our excrement, has been the source of our nourishment. And for me, it has been a huge support, a phenomenal support to let it in, the earth, to let the earth hold me, support me, and love me, care for me and protect me. You don't need to have my experience, you can have your own experience. But just notice what you notice as you let your hands be parallel to the earth, if there's any feeling or sensation or connection that you feel. If there are special places where you feel more safe, more relaxed, more protected. And if there are, you can allow yourself to think of them, to remember them. You can have pictures of them around you. And now bringing the feet in and letting the hands hang by the side, standing posture, and just letting the tension relax and keeping the eyes open. And just notice if there's heat in your hands or tingling in your hands. Notice if there's heat in your feet or tingling in your feet. Notice what you're noticing. And let's sit down. So what's the difference between observing and experiencing? What was your experience with this? Any shares?
A lot more grounding, a lot more sanity.
Grounding and sanity. Anybody else?
Becoming observing as you were stepping back and watch you are experiencing where you are. That's happening.
So you're stepping back and watching when you're observing.
Like internally, psychologically. To me, it kind of comes to me as like a visual image. I'm actually like physically stepping back and watching what's going on.
Anybody else?
Until you asked the question, I wasn't even aware that I hadn't been observing and rather was experiencing. So the experiencing is just it's sort of unmitigated, just sort of present with what's happening. And observing, it's sort of a double process, or I'm separated from experience.
Anybody else? This is great, yeah?
I had another humbling experience. It's very hard for me to feel things in my body, or at least for more than like a split second, because a comparing, judging mind is like chasing that and is so close. The space is so small that like it's just like, okay, I can like feel my leg or whatever for like, you know, maybe a tenth of a second, and then something is saying, okay, that's, you know, this is not as good of a leg as everyone else has, or whatever, some shit like that. And damn, I guess I'm just like, if it is possible to get better, if it is possible to heal that, it's just like kind of, I feel kind of just like discouraged how long I'm imagining it would take.
So when we are imagining how long it might take, we are projecting something into the future.
Oh yeah.
And so we just have to reel it back into the place that we can connect with it right here. And so if closing your eyes and trying to feel things in your body is not working for you, then open your eyes and see what you see and stay with the visual contact. There's a reason why the body does not feel easy to be with. And you don't need to understand all of that, but just understand that it's not your fault that it is that way. So just work with it as a piece of information and open your eyes up and work with something visual. Or work with something that you hear. Okay? So this comes back to that question, what's the difference between experience and observation? And what I heard is that you all, those of you who answered it. You got it. That there's a difference between the direct experience of something and a pulled back observation of something. In observation, there's a gap between the direct experience and how we are processing it. Yeah? That gap is where we fall into with dissociation. And that gap is something that people can do easily when they think that what meditation is about observing. So what we want is to directly experience what is happening. And that sometimes brings us in contact with things that are unpleasant. And so the reason why we can want that space is because it can appear that it makes it easier to bear. But the reality is that we cannot resolve something in a dissociative space. When that gap gets too big, it's no longer a place where what is coming up can resolve or release. So we're aiming for the direct experience of things, and what helps us is to move back and forth between the sensations which are unpleasant and the sensations that are pleasant. It's easier to relax in the feeling of our body when our body feels safe or warm or pleasant or pleasurable or comfortable than when it doesn't. So when we can feel a little bit of those feelings, we can accentuate it, remember what it feels like, pay particular attention to the body when it's feeling calm or a tiny bit of safe or not so shut down. And just allow that to become bigger, accentuate it. So I want to do a Tonglen meditation and another meditation, then we'll break and we'll do some workshop in dyads. So come into a way that feels comfortable to sit. Actually, let me just ask, does anybody need water before we do this? Do you want to come get misted? Want to get misted? Come. Anybody else? So come into a place that feels comfortable enough. And just begin to bring your attention to something that's difficult in your body right now, or something that's difficult in your experience right now. It might be a physical sensation, or it might be a feeling of anxiety, or it might be a thought that's been looping, or it might be a memory. And without going into the story of it, without going into the details of it, just get a sense of the color or the shape that this thing is occupying. The color of it. It might not have a color. And just check and see if there's a shape that is connected to it. And so you're not going into the story related to it, not going into the specifics about it, just checking to see if there's a shape associated with it. Does it have a tone? And is there a mood associated with it? Is there emotion connected to it? So now we're going to allow the color, the shape, the tone, the mood, the motion to turn into a gray mist or black smoke. And we're going to breathe it in, not so that we get lung cancer, so that it dissolves the sense of us feeling as an isolated, separate lump. And into this unpleasant sensation, we're going to breathe out the things that we appreciate about ourselves, the sense of confidences that we do have, the fact that we all have bodies that can walk in here. Can breathe. The places where we are connected to our gratitude, to our resources. We take all of the goodness that we can connect with in ourselves and we give it. we give it to that unpleasant sensation. And notice the result. Be present with the experience of the result. And if your mind opens up to something that's spacious and still, if that's something that you experience, just notice that. And if it doesn't, notice what's present. Okay, so now let's do another example of this. Take something that's a reoccurring pattern for you. Either a sense of contraction or fear or anxiety or a feeling of self-hatred. And we're going to do the same thing. Pick a pattern, a habit, a mental habit that's familiar to you and unpleasant, unhelpful. Maybe the sense of not feeling confident or feeling helpless. And again, without going into the story, without going into the content, without going into the history, just notice the color of that habit, mental habit. If there is one. And notice the shape. And notice the tone. And notice the movement. And the mood. And so with this mental habit that's a familiar one to you, just allow the color and the shape and the tone and the mood and the movement to turn into a mist, a black smoke, and breathe it in. And let that black smoke be a dissolvent, a solvent that keeps you feeling separate and isolated. And into that mental habit, share the gifts, resources, blessings, gratitude, talents that you have. Is there any positive result from doing that?
I feel more kind of relaxed and open. I felt like when that music started to play, I think it was like right on my exhale, so I felt like, because my eyes were closed, like I was having a little bit of a religious experience at first, because all this music started to come as I exhaled, but yeah, it was nice. I can see how that would be useful to do on a regular basis.
It was interesting for me how the shape changed. I wasn't expecting that. The shape of what I was feeling uncomfortable with had, jagged edges, and as I became more open to it, that shape changed, and then it became a triangle, and then it became a circle, and it was interesting. I wasn't expecting that, and yeah, and then the mood shifted, and there was more energy.
So is it that you imagine to be like, you had said something about smoke?
So one thing that we can do is we can imagine, or we can, things that are painful, physical sensations or moods or habits that are painful, we can imagine that they're dissolving into smoke and breathe them in. And then breathe out what is, we have a sense of what is wholesome and good. So we take the things that are difficult for us to work with, and into that which is difficult, we bring what is good. And we watch what happens when we do that. Yeah.
Actually, when I had PTSD, and those emotions are very powerful, and then for me to think of it as like image, color, texture, or the shape, I think gives me a sense of relief. There's something more visible, or there's something that I cannot find words to describe. And then during this practice, the color started with a dark gray and blackish, and then it turned to a really bright red, which I thought was associated with the anger. And then like over time, it was a very sharp edges, then very like dark bright red, like a blood red. And then over time, the color changed it into kind of grayish, and in the end, there's like no color. And then the shape became rounder, and then over time, the shape kind of disappeared. And then kind of like a smoke, so it kind of dissolved in a way. And then, I don't know, I felt so relieved, like actually like even fell asleep.
So what's really helpful is when we have different ways, frames of reference to relate to something. So it can happen when certain things come, that we have a habit of what comes up, and then there's a few ways that we respond to it. When we shift the ways that we respond to it and look at it like this, in terms of color or shape or texture or tone or mood, then it shifts our normal way that we're relating to it. And because we are directly with these different experiences of color, shape, mood, tone, then the whole thing, the whole habit can also begin to shift and change and begin to soften and have not such a strong grip.
Actually started painting, kind of channeling those very powerful emotion into a canvas with colors and textures by adding texture to it. And then when I started doing it, it's like having major flashbacks. And then I feel very overwhelmed and overpowered, or even feeling immobilized. But actually for me, painting is actually body movement, and the color textures and on a kind of structured canvas form gives me a sense of kind of safety or relief. So by the time I'm done with the painting, there's like a huge relief. I don't feel as anxious or unsafe or frightened any longer.
Yeah. So when you see that movement towards release, what that feels like in your body, that's the place to move towards. And the things when it's overwhelming, that's to turn attention away from that to something that helps bring more calm. And the tools that help reframe it so that there's more calm and release are the ones to work with. And the times when the emotions get overwhelming it's time to shift focus and do something that's more settling.
So when I go see a therapist, it's usually a talk therapist, and then I feel like I have to express what those powerful emotions are, but often I cannot seem to even begin to find words to describe them. That makes me feel overwhelmed and even helpless. So for me, like expressing it like a visual, the colors, gives me more.
So before you came in here this morning, somebody was sharing about they had done talk therapy and then they went to go see a somatic experiencing therapist and had a different result. So because the way trauma operates is that it shuts down the frontal cortex of the brain, then there's some research that shows that that a way of working with it that is effective does not require that kind of speaking. A kind of way that helps is when you move your attention with different sensations. So I know of 3 different modalities that are helpful. One is somatic experiencing, one is trauma release exercises, and one is EMDR. I think it means eye movement desensitization response. Reprocessing. And in the EMDR, the TRE, and the somatic experiences, all of them are working with body sensations and very little story, very little verbalization. And the trauma release exercises, it's about the psoas muscles and how the psoas muscles store tension when there's a trauma in the system. And so that whole methodology is based on and seeing if we can get ourselves to shake and tremble and release the trauma that way. So I've said that I think that it's really important to know that a skilled trauma person is not at all the same as trying to do this oneself with one's meditation practice. But I can also say that there's something very different about a skilled trauma person and somebody who is doing talk therapy because of the nature of the way it is stored in the body and how it releases. Yeah.
So I've been seeing a therapy, this is talk therapy, I don't think she's specialized in trauma. I've been contemplating whether I should continue to see her or not.
I think that's a very important inquiry because I think that's a very important inquiry. I would encourage you to continue contemplating that. Yeah. Because the nature of trauma is it affects our systems different than certain other kinds of things. So she might be brilliant, or he might be brilliant in a particular area, but maybe not as helpful. So you can know that when you're feeling overwhelmed in the therapy session, that's a sign. That's a sign to pay attention to, that the therapist is not holding you in that release zone that helps support the release to happen. Yeah. So
what's the somatic experience?
Somatic experiencing is a therapy based on tracking your physical sensations that really understands this whole mechanism of the way trauma is stored in your nervous system and how it progresses from freeze to flight to fight, and how you don't need a lot of words in order to feel the discomfort of the sensations in order to move through them. So Peter Levine has written a number of books They're excellent on trauma and has practitioners that are trained all over the place. I know that there are many in the Bay Area. And so if you look up somatic experiencing, there will be a practitioner list that you can find trained somatic experiencing therapists. The same with EMDR and the same with trauma release exercises. So that I know of these 3 modalities that are specific for trauma. Yeah. How you doing? Doing okay?
What was the third one? So there was EMDR and then somatic experiencing.
And then trauma release exercises, TRE. So I want to do another guided meditation with you. Up for that? Yeah? Okay. So find yourself in a position that feels comfortable. And in some meditation centers, the custom is to take shoes off. Here it's not so much, but in some places there's a tradition where you take your shoes off before you come in. And so just let's imagine that we're in a place like that, where once we come in the door, we take our shoes off. And there's a nice place to put your shoes. And so we take our shoes off and we put them in this nice place. And in addition to taking our shoes off, we leave behind our memories of what happened before. And we are also invited to leave behind our ideas of who we are. And we're also invited to leave our habits, particularly the habits that we know don't serve us any longer. There also is a place next to our shoes for each of these things. So we're invited in. We're invited into the meditation hall, but we leave our past, we leave our habits that don't serve us anymore. We leave our ideas of who we think we are. And we leave our future thinking about how things are going to turn up or might turn out or supposed to turn out or could turn out in the future. And so we're welcome. Everyone is welcome. No one is left out. But we're welcome and invited to leave these things behind. So we come in just with an awareness of knowing what is. Just the simplicity of knowing what is. And we come and we sit down. And when we sit down, what we just notice is that our body is like a mountain. It's upright. It's connected to the earth. Our head is pointing into the heavens, just like a mountain. And just like a mountain, we feel ourselves being dignified. We feel ourselves in our strength. We feel ourselves grounded. So we let our body be like a mountain. We don't have to do anything to make it like a mountain. We don't have to do anything to make it different than it is. We just allow it to be like a mountain, to be the way it is. And feel our body dignified and upright and grounded. And then we let our breath be like the wind. So we don't have to control it, we don't have to change it, we don't need to make it anything, we don't need to watch it or follow it. We just release it, just like the wind. So it comes and it goes. It does so on its own. We don't need to be concerned or bothered or worried about our breath. Just like the wind, it's free to come and go as it does. And now we let our mind be like the sky, vast and open and spacious, just like the sky. And in a sky, there are clouds that come and go, but the sky is not worried by them. The sky does not collect the pleasant clouds and push the unpleasant ones aside. The sky is big and vast and can hold clouds that are beautiful, clouds that are ominous, clouds that are inspiring, clouds that obscure the sun. So sometimes it's possible to relate to the thoughts and the habits and the memories and the future thinking and the ideas of who we are, like they're just clouds floating in the sky. And when we experience the mind as vast and open as the sky, it doesn't really have a beginning, it doesn't really have an ending. When we experience the mind vast and open as the sky, we don't need to be preoccupied with the clouds that are passing through. We don't need to feel confused about who we might be. When we're the sky, or who we have been or might become. When our mind is open and vast as the sky. Body like a mountain, breath free like the wind. Mind open and spacious and vast as the sky. alive and luminous and radiant, vastness, conscious awareness in the vastness. Knowing when all the clouds pass through the sky remains. When there are no more clouds, the sky remains. Before there are any clouds, the sky remains. Vast, open, spacious, clear. Body upright and dignified and grounded like a mountain. Breath free and easy like the wind. The mind doesn't have projects. The vast open sky like this does not have projects of things that it needs to accomplish in order to be whole. It is already whole. And free. And resting. Sometimes memories can come and go. But from the perspective of being vast and open as the sky, they're just like clouds that are passing through. There isn't anything that you need to do with them. Or for them. But just allow the sky to be the sky and the clouds to be the clouds. Vast and open, spacious and clear, present. Body grounded and upright and dignified like a mountain. Breath easy and free, like the wind. Mind open and vast as the sky. Just like that meditation group where you come in and you put your shoes and your beliefs and your unhelpful habits and your memories and your future thinking into a cubby with your shoes. Vast like the sky, open, clear, present. Already whole, already peaceful, already rested. let's take a 10-minute break and come back. So before we begin with the next exercise, I want to just check in with you those meditations, the Tonglen meditation and also the big mind meditation, pervasive love meditation. Yeah, I've done that meditation in other contexts before, but this is the first time that I've had a day-long retreat that's been specifically focused around subject of trauma. And so I'm wondering for you folks, how was it for you? Was it helpful? Was it not helpful? What came up for you? Just give me some sense of how that was for you. Shelley?
I've done Tonglen before, but I find that I really wanted to follow you, so I didn't use my own imagery. So it was really hard, the breathing in the smoke and then breathing something else out, because again, I feel like that's my routine, because I'll just take stuff, so it felt like I was taking the bag in. So in the past, when I've changed it around, is to have this really warm heart, and just take in my own suffering, and bring it into my heart, and let it soften into that. But to bring in the smoke, I watch myself kind of shut down a little bit, go into with the brakes on. So I found it hard to figure out how to take care of myself because I wanted to be part of the group.
Okay, so I wonder what permission you would have needed to not follow my instructions and follow your intuition in that one.
Yeah, I don't think it wasn't like I didn't have the permission. It's like I've been so averse to groups because of my own pain around not feeling like I belong. So it was trying something out. So
Okay.
It wasn't a bad thing. It's just the noticing of, okay. And I also have health issues and chemical sensitivity. So it's like, I'm not breathing anything else. Okay. Yeah. That's just where I'm at.
So I think, when stuff like that comes up where the initial system is no way, then really what's important is to listen to that and not to override it. Because there's reasons why your system is saying no, and that needs to be respected. And so if you had you found that the Tonglen that works for you is to just breathing pain into a loving heart, then one of the interesting byproducts of living in a monastery is learning when not to listen to the teacher. Learning when not to listen to the teacher and when to tune into one's own specifics, because there's lots of times when the teacher is talking about something that's either not helpful or the opposite. It's actually doing something that's the opposite. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for letting us voice.
Yeah.
Can I ask actually a question about that? I feel like there are sometimes when perhaps a teacher or someone like that is asking me to stretch myself a little bit, and I sometimes feel like for me to put on the brakes is also to not listen to the value that they're trying to impart. And sometimes there's some clear times when I'm like, dude, I am not doing that. But there's sometimes a gray area, I think.
Absolutely. So with everything, there's a context. And so in this situation, I wasn't particularly dialed into what was going on for her. I was speaking to the group. And so if you are in a relationship with a teacher that you have confidence and trust in, and there's a specific suggestion that they ask you to do, sometimes they're asking you to do things which are challenging because it goes against a habit or a tendency, and it's in your best interest. And so there's the kind of resistance which is going against what we know is going to be not good for us, and the kind of resistance where we're doing something that we don't know how to do or don't have any experience with, that pushes us into edgy territory that could potentially be helpful, So you're right, it takes discernment. And the real discerning thing is not what's happening, but how you are with it. So all of us can be experiencing resistance and aversion and be present and clear and curious and awake. And we can be experiencing resistance and be shutting down, dissociating, separating from our experience, handing our power over. And in the first instance, it's really good to stay with that and to stay in the edginess of it and to move forward. And the second, it's like, no. It's not okay to be handing your power over, to be dissociating, to be shutting down. That's not okay. So it isn't the fact that there's the resistance, it's the reaction to the resistance, the relationship to the resistance, which is where the discernment comes from. Yeah. Yes?
When I'm doing total blend, I get way too caught up in the imagery and really like the tactile experience, like what it is, what it actually feels like to really smoke. But what for me it always comes I guess the good vibe always kind of like a fire extinguisher. I can feel what that feels like, and I can smell that, and I can taste it. And I get totally pulled out of like, no, this is metaphorical, this is relational, this is not about like smoking a lot, this is not about doing fires. And I'm curious as to how to deal with that. Is that helpful? Is that tangential? Is it just discursive thought in a different form?
So you know, they're good questions, and I don't have an easy answer for them. I think that if your mind becomes really engrossed with the specific details of what it is to breathe in smoke, then I think there's something in that that's not working for you. And I would encourage you to explore alternatives that might be working better for you. So, you know, Shelley Ocean was talking about having a warm heart that things can land in. If that might be something that works better for you. I don't know what would work better for you. But if your mind locks in around the imagery, then the point of it is not the imagery. The point of it is to have a movement back and forth between allowing that which is unpleasant in and letting that inness be something that dissolves the fundamental ignorance that has us feeling separate, and then breathing out and breathing a sense of our goodness, or the sense of what we have a wholesome connection with. Yeah. Yes, please. So there are lots of different tools for working with different kinds of thoughts, and some of them are very useful. And that's one of the things that we have to navigate with, is our thinking gets hijacked, and we have to learn how to both recognize that it's hijacked and turn the ship, so that it's not we're not inundated with this negative and critical and judgmental thinking. And so that's a whole kind of process of understanding how to deal with obsessive thoughts, how to deal with nightmares, how to stay present in that. And certainly metta is one thing, but another thing that's helpful is just shifting your field of attention to something that's happening in the present moment that's pleasant. And so if what's happening is your body is feeling very anxious, then I would scan the room for something that's pleasant for you to look at and let your eyes rest there. And as you're looking at something that's pleasant, notice the impact on your body of seeing something that's pleasant. So another thing that you can do is you can just talk with people, because the way the brain works in terms of relationships, it soothes anxiety when we speak with somebody else. So somebody who showed me how to do the trauma release exercises said that he would feel anxious when he would fly in an airplane. And so when the anxiety would raise up, he would just go into a store in the airport and just speak about nothing in particular to the storekeeper, just to be in relationship, because the relationship itself would soothe the anxiety. And so, you know, and I've noticed here today that some of you who have come with friends, that there's tenderness and affection and caring between each other. And that's a hugely important way of supporting, is when there's stuff that's coming up, is just to reach out and to feel comforting physical touch. And if your friend knows you well, then soothing, kind words. So there was a question earlier about how we can support each other. And one of the ways that we can support each other is by affirming a sense of safety, affirming a sense of care, of warmth, of protection. That those are all helpful things that we can do to each other when we notice somebody else is navigating a trauma response. You know, I see you, I get you, I'm here for you. What do you need? How can I make this space safe for you? Because the primary pattern is around feeling powerless and helpless. And so without wanting to intercede in somebody's choices, but to be able to help support them to then make good choices, and to feel the safety of having people around who get you, who care, who are warm, that you're not here by yourself having to figure it all out. Yeah. Anything else in terms of how the big mind meditation landed? What impact it had? Yes?
I actually wanted to go back to Tom Lynn for a second, because I don't like the idea of breathing in smoke, despite the fact that probably everybody here has seen me smoking outside. Sorry. But one of the descriptions I read talked about, there was kind of children talked about the sort of claustrophobic feeling about being in intense emotion and breathing in that claustrophobic feeling. And for me, as somebody who has a lot of issues with anxiety, generalized anxiety, and I have PTSD, so don't get it. I can totally get it and really have a lot of compassion for claustrophobia. I don't have a lot of compassion towards my smoking because I hate it and I wish I would quit. But kind of being able to use that, like whatever works.
So tell me more. How do you breathe in the claustrophobic feeling? What do you do with it?
You're breathing it into your heart.
So you're letting this difficult, tight feeling land in your warm, open heart.
In your tender little heart, you just let yourself feel that claustrophobia, and then you're breathing out whatever releases it. So most of the time for me, it's just ease. But taking that, and then there's that extension piece of extending that out to, oh, this is how everybody who has anxiety feels. Anyone who's scared right now in the entire world, they're feeling exactly this claustrophobic feeling that I'm feeling in my body. And I like that description because it's really easy for me to take off the cushion and do when I'm tooling around town.
Thank you. Is your hand up? I can't see your hand. Is it up? So in my own practice, for me, I have been navigating it from both ends, touching into the big mind of what's big and vast and spacious, touching into that, and then touching the trench work of jumping into this nitty-gritty of working with the specific difficult sensations and toggling back and forth between difficult sensations and positive sensations and cultivating loving kindness and bringing it to what it is. And sometimes it's much more trench work. And sometimes there's more sense of what is big and spacious and pervasive. And together, these two give a sense of the innate wholeness and well-being that's already there, that has always been there. And then the trench work is to deal with the specifics of the unpleasant memories and sensations as they're arising, and to work with them in a way that meets them in an appropriate way, where there isn't a locking down into it, there isn't a pushing through it, but meeting it and touching it and allowing it to slowly and gently release. Yes?
Yeah, so much like you said, I think today, the sky line meditation worked for me, and it often pisses me off though, because often it doesn't work because I don't really believe it. Like if I don't really believe that I'm okay despite I mean it's supposed to be temporary thing going by, then I guess I really don't want to just pretend that I can believe it, or even fake it till I make it. I don't even want to do that. It also kind of
So sometimes things land in different ways. I get it. And what can be inspiring today can be infuriating tomorrow. I get it. Yeah. And glad that it worked for you today. So part of the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because if anyone was feeling infuriated or devastated, I wanted to give an opportunity for you to speak. It isn't always magic, yes.
That's what I was really about. It wasn't magic.
It wasn't magic.
You said this thing during the second meditation about the sun being covered by the clouds, and it reminded me, it brought back a memory. You're supposed to not have it, which didn't work for me at all. But being a small child raised in Tucson, and I used to spend hours hiding from the sun, and I was bored, and I would close my eyes and I would just picture clouds gathering and rain, and then I thought I was making it rain because it would rain, that it was just that it was summer and it was monsoons, or maybe I was making magic, I don't know. But it didn't work. I tried it. As soon as you said that, I was like, I can do that thing I did as a kid. And then I went outside and it's the sunny guys. All right, I tried.
So in Tucson, where the heat is blistering hot, having the clouds obscure the sun and having it rain is a completely welcome thing. And so, even the imagery, it needs to be contextual, because in Tucson or even in here in San Francisco, it feels a little bit too hot. And so what we don't need is more sun. What we need is something that's damp and cool and moist, We need some balance. So what's great about this is that you're true with your own experience, that you know what works and what doesn't work. And that's awesome, because that is really much more important than it actually working, is that you're true with your own experience. So that's excellent. Yeah, good. So what I'd like to do now is to have you take your cards, and I'd like you to put on one side of your card resources.
Resources?
Yeah. I'll talk about it. Yeah. There's pens on the back table next to the rocks, I think, or next to the flyers. So we need three things. So we need to have three things. One on one side is resources, and on the other side we need to have a line down the middle, and we have obstacles and the second thing is I want to say to develop. To develop, yeah.
One side obstacles, one side.
So you've got three things.
Right.
Yeah? One side is obstacles and the other side is to develop. So what I'd like you to do is to take some time, and under resources, what I'd like you to consider and reflect on and make some notes about it. What are the resources that you have currently that help you deal with the stuff that goes on for you related to trauma or intense emotional activation? So take some time with that. On the side that talks about resources, what I'd like you to reflect on and make some notes of are what are the resources that you currently have in your life right now that help you deal with the trauma and intense emotional activation that you experience. Was that clear? Okay, so winding up that, and now going to the next page, turning over. And what I'd like you to do is to spend some time and reflect on and list what are the obstacles that interrupt or keep you from accessing the resources that you have. What are the obstacles that you experience that interrupt or keep you from accessing the resources that you have? Okay, and the last one. Is given what you know about yourself and what we've talked about here, what are a few areas that you could develop to increase your resources that you have available to you? Okay, so winding up. So now I'd like to offer an opportunity here for people who feel comfortable to work in pairs, And for people who are not feeling comfortable to work in pairs, we could work together as a group together with me in the corner. So who feels at ease working in pairs to talk this thing through? Raise your hand up. Okay, so pair people, can you go to this side of the room? Was that question, was that clear? If you feel at ease to work with one other person to talk this through, then can you go to that side of the room? Is that okay? Okay. So pair people, if you can find a partner on the pair side of the room, if you can find a partner, and then what I'd like you to do is just to spread out so that you're facing each other. So we move the chairs around so that you find somebody that you're working with and you are facing each other. And you can be on the floor or in chairs, but what's important is that you are face to face. And for you guys, I'm going to work with you in the group over here. Did you understand my question?
Kind of.
Is this an English question rather than an actual question? Is this about English?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed because I speak like a parakeet, so I don't have a problem. But right now I feel like
Nervous?
no, I don't want that. I don't want to be with others because I feel so heavy. My stomach exploded, so that kind of bring my energy down in a way.
Is there somebody else who speaks Spanish here that would feel okay with you?
Oh no, I'm fine because
Okay, so we can do together as a group. Let's bring some chairs. Yeah. Can you hear me okay if I'm over here? Is it coming through the loudspeaker? Can you hear?
This chair for you. You can have this one.
Thank you. I need a chair.
Yes.
So what I'd like you to do with your person is to find out what your person's name is. Are you joining us? Are you your partner? Okay. And so what I'd like you to do is I'm going to guide you through a couple of insight dialogue preliminary exercises before we're going to touch our questions. So put your questions aside for a moment. And we'll do it differently because we're in a group. Okay? But it is good for us to bear with us because we're a little bit slower than you guys are. Can I just find out what your names are?
Your what?
What's your name?
Bruni.
Bruni?
Sarah. Carmen.
Okay, and I'm Amma. So I'm going to be doing a couple of things with them, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to change the exercises for us. And so what I'd like you to do is to find between your partners, pick somebody who goes first. So I'll tell you what the going first person is going to do in a minute. You're going to do a body scan. And and if body scan does not feel comfortable to you, then I'd like you to do a visual scan, where you're just letting your eyes relax and rest and noticing what you notice in the visual field. Okay? So whoever's going first, your instruction is to keep it as simple and as present as possible about what's happening. Either in your body, noticing immediate sensations and where it's happening, or noticing in your visual field what you see, with as little story connected to it as possible. So is that instruction clear? Okay.
You're supposed to share that out loud?
Yes, so the person who's doing that is going to speak it. And the person who's listening, your job is just to be in your own experience as you're listening to your partner share. Now, both of you are welcome to pause. And what pause means is that you just stop what you're doing and drop your attention in to help yourself regulate again. So, if body is not feeling like a safe place, then what it means is you just look around and notice what you notice in the visual field. So if you're listening and you're getting absorbed or somehow immersed in the content or the details of what your partner is saying, and you lose contact with yourself, then just close your eyes or stop focusing on what your partner is saying and start just paying attention to the things that are in the room visually or to the sensations in your own body. So the person listening, it's actually more challenging to listen than it is to speak and to stay connected with your own experience. But that's what our aim is. Is that clear? Yeah? Now before we go into this, let me just read you, if I can find it. I had brought it up someplace. I think it's here. Inquiry guidelines. Let me just read you inquiry guidelines. So during this time where we're in dyads together, the inquiry guidelines that we've worked out that seem to be supportive is to come forward with an active listening, a non-judgmental observation that hears and notices but doesn't scrutinize. It's engaging without intention to fix or do any therapy. Is that clear? Yeah? Using I statements, so speaking from your own direct experience. So this is not an opportunity to share your philosophical knowledge from what you've read, but just to stay present with what's going on for you directly. Again, to make sure that you take care of yourself, that you do what you need to do, and that you don't do what you don't want to do. So if I suggest doing something and it's not going to work for you, don't do it. And just to be careful to stay clear that whatever you share, you're sharing because you want to. Don't put yourself, take care that you're not feeling overexposed, that you're not revealing something that leaves you feeling more vulnerable than you would like to be. And whatever happens in these groups or in these pairs is confidential. So this confidentiality means that it doesn't leave the sharing together here. And the pause is going to continue throughout this whole exercise. So if there's something that's keeping you from being fully present with yourself or with your partner, then pause yourself or your partner or pause the group, because the most important thing is not that we have all of us doing the same thing, but that we're cultivating a quality of presence with ourselves and with each other. So if something is just hijacking your attention, then either pause yourself, pause your partner, or pause me, and we can attend to what is needed. Is there anything in this that I've said that is uncomfortable, or you need more clarification, or doesn't work for you, or you need to amend? Are you good with it? Yeah? Is there anything that I missed that you would need to have present in order to feel more comfortable or a little bit more safe? Okay? You're all right? Okay. So we'll go back to the initial instruction, which is either the body or visual scanning, with the first person speaking, just speaking with as few words and as little context as possible. And the person listening, staying in your own experience as you hear. You don't need to lock eyes. You can let your eyes drift and be where they feel at ease. And just remembering for both of you to pause yourselves whenever you need to stay with what's going on. And when you hear the sound of the bell, please begin. So for us, we're not going to do it in pairs, but let's go around and have a little bit of time for each person to share body sensations or visual things that you're experiencing, so that we can just take this as an opportunity to drop in. Okay? I'll start. Shoulders relaxing. Feeling weight in my seat. Feeling pressure behind my eyes. Dropping in. Feeling the extension of the exhalation. The warmth of my heart. I'm going to ring the bell for them, but we'll stay with you for a little bit longer.
Oh, I think I'm all set.
Okay. So when you hear the bell, you pause, and now changing speaker, so that the one who is listening is now speaking, and the one who is speaking is now listening.
Breath is shallow. It goes through the throat and stagnant a little bit here. There's warmth in most of the body, and there's a little bit of cold temperature in the fingers, and there's warmth in the palms and in the back. There is some contraction, like here. It's not hard, So there is like a zone of contraction delineating here. And as I speak is softening. And there's a thought passing by saying there is support here.
My tummy hurt, but I'm happy that I'm here. Right now I feel like I'm like in a river. I can sense the water flowing through the river, but I realize that my tummy hurt, but I'm kind of going back and forth. I know I realize that you are in pain, but we're gonna be okay.
Just let them finish in a minute, and then we'll do something else. So now just take a moment, some time, and release the separate speaker and the separate listener, and just sharing what that was like to speak in that way. Just together, the two of you, what did you notice? What happened? Just speaking and listening. What was that experience like? So for us, what was it like to share, and what was it like to share and to listen? What happened? What did you notice that's different than normal conversation about this? I know for myself, one of the things that I love about this particular practice is that even though I don't know people personally, there's a feeling, I feel a sense of being able to talk about things in a way where I feel close to people. There's a kind of warmth that I feel towards everyone here. And even though I wasn't talking about anything like significant, because I wasn't adding story to it, there's a way that I feel more relaxed and more at ease having done this. And a little bit more like I know you better. Anyone can speak now.
That's how I feel too, but like I never say it, you know, so I felt like by being quiet and just listening to what people were saying, that I was show that I was wanting to get some
wonderful that I don't feel there is a barrier. Some always say that I'm very, I remind myself too much that I'm Salvadorian. And you know, in this practice, I'm a human.
Yes.
So that is wonderful. You just love people just the way we are.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
I appreciate that everything is welcome in however, whatever we're at, whatever we say, whatever we don't say, that there's space for it. I appreciate that. And there's a trust or some kind of bowing for the sharing of humanity that we share.
And so now what I'd like to do is to invite you to go to the first person who is speaking and to take out your paper and to share from your paper what you would like to reveal about those three areas, the supports, resources that you have, the obstacles that keep you from accessing them, and the places that you might be able to develop that give you more resource. And this time, what I'd like is for the person listening not just to be completely silent, but what I'd like is when you feel impact, when you feel curious, when you feel excited, when you feel happy, when you feel sad, to share that. No judgment. It's not a judgment. It's just an immediate, direct experience. And also, if you've got a question, to share that. Yes?
How do we share the happy or the whatever without interrupting, and what content, like how do you?
So it's a little bit of an art form because you are interrupting. And I usually, what I do is I wait until, they take a breath or something, and I say, when you said that, I felt joy. Or when you said that, I felt sad. Or when you said that, or I just catch him and I say, oh, that makes me happy. Yeah. Any other questions? So questions that you can ask are genuine questions that you have about, for yourself wanting to know how that is for them, not questions how they can practice differently in order to satisfy you. Do you get the difference between those two kinds of questions? Is that clear? Yes, Molly? Was that your hand up? No, okay. maybe what I would suggest is that somebody who feels comfortable to go first goes first, and then we can just go in a circle. Does that work? And if you don't feel comfortable to share, there's no pressure. There's no need. So it's the wisdom of the teachings.
And then I don't find anger because I keep reminding myself that if I meditate, so develop just with what I experienced so far right now. I feel like I should be more aware of my body language and emotion and facial expression with my client instead of telling them, "You'll be okay, you'll be okay." By me saying "you'll be okay," sometimes I have to place in my feelings. And my belief is, if I say that to sometimes like giving the reassurance that everything's okay, but knowing what I'm here now and patient, I need to let them be able to let the person break themselves by me suppressing it. So it's hard because it's like, I'm obsessed with it, but then also I can fix it, like the washing machine, you can fix it, and it feels good, but I can be fixing it and not think about anything else, and only fix on that, and it's not positive, you know what I mean? That's the obstacle side of the same thing. For my resources, I just wrote like my cat and my friend. like work, you know, you have go home and then I can take my daughter to the ocean or something. Right after she gets in from school and I go home from work, we can go. Don't worry about cleaning the house, don't worry about fixing anything, don't worry about anything, just go. I don't know if I can do that, but I can.
I love hearing that. And I also love hearing about your cat. So winding up with that share, winding up with your questions in that one share, and now we're going to change partners so that the other partner has a chance to share. So when you say that, I see your face light up a little bit, and I'm curious to know more about how it is for you to be in groups with teachers who are good role models.
Like maybe there's some hope or something. Maybe I could be okay.
You say that, I feel both happy and also very tender.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. Yeah, there's like some resource that like definitely exists more now than it used to. Like that tattoos on the heart. There's this like Jesuit pastor dude who like helps gang members in really profound ways, and he talks about no matter whatness. So cultivating no matter whatness with myself, just doing it. It's scary, but that's a resource, and that is kind of the resource, like my holding environment or whatever, so I can actually do all the things I want to do, be all the things I want to be. Yeah, I didn't want to give any airtime to my obstacles because that puts me in a bad place. I feel like I need to to work with 30% of my mind that's doing productive stuff rather than 70% that's not. Okay.
Thank you. So resources, the practice, the law for the practice, the faith for the practice, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the precepts, just love it. Nature, friendship, spiritual friendship. Obstacles, pruning, once in a while pruning. I mean, not to, it's good. And sometimes, it's good to acknowledge, I'm on the way, I'm blocking something. So, but, respectfully and lovingly. So, I will say that was everything came back to that. And then to develop, continue developing the 4 Brahmaviharas, joy and equanimity and compassion are, with loving kindness is kind of a regular one, and with that I would like to give nourishing more the other 3, and the continuity of remembering that this life and practice is one. And that's enough.
So what was it like hearing each other speak? What was it like hearing each other's?
It brings a lot of joy. And
I feel connected. There's connection and there's respect and honor to listen.
It was pretty wow.
It's pretty wow, yes.
Came up here today. We were in the Spanish language. And he told me about this class, and this morning I was like, because a lot of people are out of my house. So I'm grateful. Thank you, thank you. And I keep looking in the back, and when I say two of them, I think, this is awesome. Because we come to the Spanish language.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Did you say Spanish?
That's how you say Sangha.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know.
winding up your thoughts, winding up your sentence, your thoughts, and in a way that feels gentle and easeful and mutual and respectful, acknowledge your partner and come back to the circle. Yes, we're done with pens. Pens can go back in here.
This is the one on the course you mentioned this morning, the 5 class.
That's right.
Great.
Yeah. So would anyone like to share into the larger group snippets of insights of what that was like to do that together? Is there anything that you learned from that exercise you didn't know before? Catherine, yeah? You learned that you're not nearly as embodied when you're speaking as you are when you're listening. And that was a surprise. So something happened in the process of doing it that was insightful for you. Interesting. Yes, Millie.
I think I did this exercise like 3 years ago when I first was diagnosed with PTSD and generalized anxiety. And right before I quit using alcohol. And what's been interesting is that the obstacles and the stuff to develop are pretty much the same things. But what's different is I have a lot more support. And so what are in the obstacles did not surprise me. I'm like, oh, it's the same stuff. But when I was writing out to develop, it was like, keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that, and keep doing that, you know? And, but in terms of like the resources, I remember really vividly having to fill out like what the resources of my life were for Kaiser. And just being in this place where I was just a mess and totally felt like I was alone and permanently unique and nobody ever felt the way that I felt. And just seeing that like that resource list be really clear, and it was like, yep, I've got that and those people, that's who I call when I'm this way. And it kind of, there's a teaching that comes up a lot for me, and it's the one where as usual, Ananda says, oh, I see, I understand. Sangha is really important to practice. And Buddha's like, no, 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 Ananda. Sangha is the whole of the practice. Like that community of support can make huge changes in terms of at least for me, my ability to like feel safe enough to even start opening up my heart again. And now that I kind of like have done that work intensively, now I have like a lot that I can hold, and also not just for myself, for others as well.
Beautiful. Would anyone else like to share? Yes, Mel.
One thing that I found interesting was, like when I looked at the resources, more than not, they were getting out of bed and often getting out of the body. And for me, I came here for being a fucking drug addict, so anything close to distraction feels very highly charged and very much like a mistake. I got done a lot of distractions and a ton of research on becoming way too hungry and getting anxious. So getting back in that direction is extremely highly charged and feels like a mistake. It feels unsafe. So I often struggle with sort of like kamikaze, like evil Knievel attitude of like, nope, I'm gonna sit with all of this shit. I'm gonna get as deep as I can, and like in the point when I start like quivering and fall off my share, like that means that I'm killing. But the reality of it is, there's a difference between pushing oneself to sit with an uncomfortable feeling versus reeling oneself in from an absolute total fucking meltdown. And if you need to like go run around and do what physical shit and you can't stop crying or hyperventilating, that's not cross addiction. That's not like a failing. The problem is that the situation is so fucking different that it's like, no, you want to be distracted? That's cool. We'll start there, and then some more we can process this. You don't want to be like, well, is the feeling in my stomach like a wrenching, or more like I'm getting impaled? Like, I don't want to be in the body at that point. So, learning, I don't know, really looking into the different degrees of separation, different kinds of meditation, different kinds of emotional regulation, and turning away from the often really so promise of the panacea, which is a really easy so when there's a lot of desperation. But
So Mel, when I hear you speak, what I hear is a lot of discernment that has developed over an awful lot of hard work around figuring out the nuances between, you know, when things are going in a direction which is not at all helpful, and when things are not conventional but helpful, you know, and that takes a lot of discernment. So when I see you speak and your eyes twinkling like that, I feel happy. Thank you. So it's often the case when I do insight dialogue practices that I encourage people not to be with close friends, domestic partners, because there's an awful lot of complexity that goes into close relationships. But in this particular situation, because there were a few people that had talked about issues of safety, I thought that I would let that aside and let people go where they felt comfortable with, and we would deal with the complexity on the other side. So just to know that part of the reason why it's often the case on insight dialogue retreats that people are encouraged not to pair up initially with their closest people is because some of the stuff is harder to figure out when you're working in close relationship with somebody that you have known really well than it is to be observing and speaking and communicating with somebody that there's more neutrality with. So I'm with you in terms of diving in and feeling the richness of it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Did you have something you wanted to share?
Sure.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I saw your hands move and I thought
no,
that...
my hand wasn't up, but I will say something. So
okay.
Just the question in terms of how is the whole process. I really liked it. I really liked being able to talk to somebody, to both be a witness, have a witness, and processing these ideas. And then specifically the categories was really great, being able to sort of identify what the resources are, what the obstacles are, and then how I can develop them. So just appreciation for the exercise.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, lovely. So what I'd like to do is to transition gears again and come back into just a meditative space and reflection on, you know, this is Labor Day weekend. It's hugely hot out. You had, each of you, many, many, many choices. So let's just sit and consider and reflect on the benefits of coming to a day like today, of what happens when each of us feels a little bit more resourced to deal with the experiences of trauma and intense emotional activation that we have ourselves, when we feel seen or safe or normalized, that our experience is contained within a larger sphere, that there are others that are also experiencing something similar. What happens when teachings are landing in a way that feel useful and helpful, as well as normalizing when teachers or teachings are not, when therapists and therapies are not helpful. Just to know that some of the things that you have lived with on your own is some of the things that all of us have experienced, or many of us have experienced. And what it feels like to come together in this way, to share the blessings of the Buddha's teachings in a way that supports us where we're at, rather than in any way asking us to be different from where we're at. And so it's a 3-day weekend. There wasn't very much notice on this day-long retreat, and the heat is formidable. It's not entirely comfortable in this heat, and yet everybody here persevered and stayed with it, and we have the blessings of our experience, our practice, our shared community, the insights that were voiced and heard, that we carry with us and bring forward. And one of the images that I heard a teacher share that really stayed with me was that when we do practice, it has a benefit, but it's a little bit like leaving a glass of water out in the sun. It is susceptible to evaporating and drying up. But when we share the blessings of our practice, it's a little bit like taking that glass of water and pouring it in the ocean. It doesn't evaporate. And so whatever goodness we have experienced directly or personally, or whatever goodness has come from enriching a field of community or developing a sense of a relational field that allows us to have a little bit more confidence and trust and safety to do this work, whatever gives us more confidence in teachings, in the possibility of awakening to what is luminous and radiant and pervasive, and to know and touch our own innate wholeness. This is a blessing. This is a tremendous blessing. Whatever touches the Sangha and allows it to grow and to flourish is a blessing. So we can take the blessings that we can identify personally, that we cannot name, and we can share it out so that all beings everywhere, so that the people who are here who are suffering from the heat, the people who are challenged with emotional activation or trauma, who don't have the support that we do, people everywhere in the world, whether they are in fortunate or unfortunate circumstances, whether they are the perpetrators or victims, no matter who they are, no matter what the circumstances, that all beings can receive the blessings of the work and the efforts of the practice that we've done here today, and can know what it is like to experience peace and to experience the mind that is pervasive and luminous and free. So I want to thank Jason and Molly and for being here, and I want to thank Vinny for allowing me to come today and for supporting me to return. And I want to thank especially each of you for your efforts to be here and the practice that we did here together. It's awesome. And I have flyers out, which hopefully you've all seen, and those of you who are interested can take. There's going to be a series of classes that starts on October 1st that is a continuation of this class, which is going to talk about individual specific bite-sized pieces of some of the things that we did, as well as some of the things that we didn't do.
How long are those sessions?
Oh, look, we don't have the time that it's happening.
That's what I noticed. Yeah.
It's an hour and a half, and it finishes at 4.
2:30 to 4.
I think an hour and a half. I think that's right. 2:30 to 4.
They're on Sundays. The dates are on the flyers.
The dates are on the flyers. The time is not here. It's 2:30 to 4. It's on Sunday.